Hello, and welcome to Exposed News Outlet. My name is Andrea, and I'm the host. I have a lot of topics to update everyone on and lots to talk about, including anti transgender rhetoric and Project 2025, as well as Trump's terrible selections for his cabinet, which I can't stress enough how incompetent many of these individuals are. Why they shouldn't take these national security positions or be trusted with such information and data. Also, Trump is literally catering to Elon Musk and his many companies funded by the government and relaxing all the requirements and safety regulations that literally protect humans from death from Elon's products, such as SpaceX, Tesla, and his other companies as well. There are reasons for these regulations and much, much more. But before I do, if I could just ask for you to please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and please like and share my videos on your social media accounts. It really helps to get my message out to the masses as I continue to grow this independent news media channel. At this time, especially when facts are crucial and disinformation, propaganda, cult ideology, and blatant lies and deceit, as well as conflicts of interest with both Trump and Elon. And as Elon is posed to possibly oversee the departments that oversee his own businesses, you can't make this shit up. Even this is too wild for SNL. Only sadly, this isn't a skit from Saturday Night Live. It's our own reality and it's our country, as well as our democracy, that is in danger. As the Democrats and liberals have warned us now what would happen, and sadly, the fact that Trump had lied to the public and the MAGA cult repeated it, all of his lies, even has their followers, the voters, repeating the lies from Project 2025 being debunked too. Trump said he doesn't know anything about that. Or Project 2025 was made up by the Dems. Has now, since the election was over, the MAGA cultists were so eager and turned on by the politics and evil and deranged policies of Project 2025. Many of them literally called out by Trump in his rallies. Many of these people that have implemented and co-authored the Project 2025, and the Republicans in the Republican-run states have already implemented such policies, such as transferring public school funds into private schools, book bans, which include more than just LGBTQ books, by the way. They want you to think that it's just LGBTQ books, but not that it really should matter. But it's far worse than just censorship of the LGBTQ community, as there are LGBTQ kids and kids that have LGBTQ family members, etc. But beyond that, they've also been banning Black biographies and Black history, as well as Indigenous history books and biographies, as these white nationalist groups try to whitewash and rewrite history in their corrupt and white crime. Just like all the cabinet positions so far have been mostly all white, with the exception of, I think, one or two, I think possibly three, including the cult puppet Vivek Ramaswamy, which sadly will be one of his only non-white selections, and he is sharing that cabinet position with Elon, by the way. But it's not even a real position. It's a recommendation panel that him and Elon will share. And as they try to hack away at the government and the needed institutions and resources, including but not limited to Medicaid, Medicare, EBT, the food stamps, as well as Social Security, which many have worked all of their lives for long and hard and should have it when they these basic fundamentals, and not have to worry about if they'll be able to retire or not when they are 60 or 65, or if they'll even have enough to pay their bills, or if they'll be kicked off their insurance for having pre-existing conditions. If these MAGA cultists repeal the Affordable Care Act, which many didn't realize it's the same thing as the Obamacare, which, by the way, was the name that the Republicans gave it because they were trying to make the public dislike it, and did the bidding of the big pharma like they always do since they've been bought and paid for many decades. And this is what the right-wing extremists have been doing around the globe, not just in the United States, pushing disinformation, propaganda, and lies. But even now, the right-wing politicians are bragging that the Dems were right all along, that Project 2025 was in fact the plan all along, and that they can't wait to start these un-American, draconian practices. Frankly, if you haven't read Project 2025, you should. And there is a violent extremism that is being amplified by the right. The right-wing extremists around the globe are currently unraveling this hate and bigotry in Europe, right now in Amsterdam. And frankly, we have to stop the gaslighting. There is no excuse for any of the anti-Semitic attacks or racism, and frankly, homophobia, transphobia, bigotry, and hate. And yet, here we are. And I find it almost offensive when white privileged straight men, go on TV and patronize the Democrats and tell us we need to get in line and respect the very individuals trying to bring upon my demise and downfall, as well as many others. Putting targets on the back of people's heads, American citizens, the marginalized and vulnerable, and at a time when tensions are high around the globe. And Trump is going to try to push through a national emergency to use the military to split up immigrants' families yet again. And Stephen Miller plans to use military funds to build new FEMA camps around the United States to hold the immigrants around the nation while they're waiting for processing and deportation to deport them out of the country. Once again, splitting up families when over 1,000 of the families that were split up last time haven't even been reunited. They can't find the children, which is sad. And there are already more than 7 million jobs that need filled at this time. Once they start rounding up millions of people from their jobs, etc., there are going to be business implications that we can't even imagine at this time. And many of these immigrants are legal citizens. Frankly, Trump has been pushing this attack on immigrants since 2015, if not sooner. That was his first boogeyman before they moved on to transgender boogeyman, and then merging the two at times. I'm surprised that they haven't been blaming transgender immigrants yet, honestly. But I guess I probably shouldn't give these low IQ cult puppets ideas. They will go along with just about anything without fact checking or doing research or any kind of vetting, and don't have brains big enough to think for themselves. They literally have to be told how to think and what to feel. And the fact of the matter, in the whole immigration issue, to begin with, Trump ran on the immigration in 2015. And he said that he and he alone would solve the immigration issue and that he would build the wall and have Mexico pay for it. Only none of that happened. And frankly, the wall was a waste of taxpayer money, and only like 10 miles or very little of the wall was ever even built. So, frankly, it was a waste of taxpayer money. Trump failed at the immigration and the wall. And then when Biden worked on the bipartisan bill and legislation drafted by the Republican lawmakers, I might add, Trump made them kill the bill. He applied pressure on them until they finally killed the bill and said that it would benefit the Democrats if they went on with the bill. So, and it would be a win for Democrats rather than being a win for the country. And he wanted to run on the problem, not fix one. And that's what it really is, folks. If he really believed that there was a crisis at the border, the fact that he would kill a bipartisan legislation bill that would address the shortfalls and the funding, the public should be outraged at Trump, not Biden and Kamala. And frankly, I'm tired of these ignorant cult puppets, punching bag, low IQ, negative individuals that get off on pushing white nationalist propaganda and cheap talking points that always get headlines or clicks and views. Yes, we would be wise to work together with the Republicans. However, we can't work alongside of individuals who actively put targets on people's heads and literally push for active discrimination and frankly pushing for white nationalist racism, misogyny, and bigotry, pushing anti-LGBTQ rhetoric and propaganda. I see a lot of these people in the comments and on the comment section saying on the LGBTQ posts that and memes, people complaining, saying this is all there is anymore online. All there is gay posts or blah, blah, blah. Or this is Facebook trying to insinuate all that's online anymore is LGBTQ propaganda and grooming, and that there is some sort of secret gay agenda to turn men out and to make people want to transition genders. I'm sorry, it's just hysterical to me, but as if that's really a thing or how any of it works, it's not. So, just before Congress was set to release the ethics report on Matt Gaetz for sexual rape charges on a minor, human trafficking of minors as well, and as drug allegations and blatant abuse of power and corruption. And this is whom Trump was trying to reward with the highest office of the law in the country and potentially oversee the departments that have been investigating him, by the way. Gaetz himself, and potentially see paperwork and investigation reports on his very victims. This is just wrong on so many levels and very un-American. None of this is normal, nor should it be treated as so. And frankly, we need to call it out for what it is and reject his extremism. We are not going to allow anyone to destroy our constitutional freedoms or these Project 2025 attempts to remove the neutral and liberal media and institutions and replace them with conservative CEOs and rip out like a tumor the current governing class, as J.D. Vance said, and replace it with a dictator, as Curtis Yarvin has addressed for many years now. One of Shady Vance's friends, which is what these MAGA cultists want. They don't want anyone to think for themselves anymore. They want to be told what to think and what to say, even if it's a bit based in reality or none of it's based in facts at all. I'm going to show a couple clips here, actually, with Republicans now admitting the quiet parts out loud and even owning up to Project 2025, a very anti-American and anti-LGBTQ and anti-Black and Indigenous agenda that, if implemented, will have devastating effects on the most vulnerable, but then also Trump's own warnings before the election about having to fix things so good that the Christians will never have to vote again. A very anti-democratic and creepy, ominous warning that, frankly, we the people have to ensure it doesn't happen. I'm going to show the clip.
If you want to save America, get your friends, get your family, get everyone you know, and vote. Vote early, vote absentee, vote on election day. I don't care how, but you have to get out and vote. And again, Christians, get out and vote just this time. You won't have to do it anymore. 4 more years, you know what? It'll be fixed. It'll be fine. You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians. I love you, Christians. I'm a Christian. I love you. Get out. You got to get out and vote. In 4 years, you don't have to vote again. We'll have it fixed so good you're not going to have to vote.
But I said there's a lot going on at the surface level in terms of donors and campaign positions and campaign strategy and the way they're behaving in public. There's a lot that is weird about this campaign thus far. But there is one last thing in terms of the weirdness of this campaign that I think is actually quite serious. You probably heard this weekend that Donald Trump told an audience on Friday night that if they vote for him this November, if he's voted back into office this November, they will never have to vote again. He told an audience on Friday to, quote, get out and vote just this time. He said after this time, quote, you won't have to do it anymore. You won't have to vote anymore. He said, quote, in 4 years, you don't have to vote again. We'll have it fixed so good, and you're not going to have to vote. Now, this is not the first time Trump has told a campaign audience that they will never have to vote again once they vote him back in this time. And that is as alarming as it sounds for all the reasons that you immediately think it is, right? I mean, he's positing this like this is a happy thing. Oh, joy, never having the burden of voting again, right? The point of democracy is that we vote all the time, and we like it. That's how we decide what happens in our country. He's promising his followers that he'll end all of that. And it's exactly what you think it is. But let me also point out something more strange, which has been happening at the same time and hasn't had as much attention. The day before Trump made those remarks on Friday he said, you're never going to have to vote again after you vote for me this one time. The day before that, on Thursday last week, he didn't say that people wouldn't have to vote anymore once he was elected this November. No, the day before that, on Thursday, he told his supporters, not that they're not going to have to vote again, but that they don't have to vote this time, that they don't need to vote for him this November.
My instruction, we don't need the votes. I have so many votes.
My instruction, we don't need the votes. I have so many votes. He said that on Thursday last week. And it turns out this is something, when you look, he says this all the time now. Watch.
My instruction, we don't need the votes. I have so many votes.
We don't need votes. I tell my people, I don't need any votes. We got all the votes we need. I don't need votes.
We don't need votes. We got more votes than anybody's ever had.
You don't have to vote. Don't worry about voting. The voting, we got plenty of votes.
Don't worry about voting. Of all the weirdness around this campaign, this is a truly strange thing to tell people, right? Don't vote. I don't need your vote. I don't want your vote. I mean, all the surface level weirdness is, worth noting. Having a new position on literally anything you can think of as soon as any random rich guy tells you to, that's a weird thing. Picking the eccentric billionaire's intern for your running mate, even though you apparently had no idea who he was or what a disaster he is on television, all of this is weird. But telling voters, do not bother to vote for me, it doesn't matter if you do, I don't need your votes. That is a thing that should prick up your ears. Because what that means is that he doesn't think he needs to win the vote to win the election. He doesn't think he needs to win the election in order to take power. He thinks something other than votes is going to determine whether or not he gets back in the White House. At Rolling Stone today, they profile 70 different election officials who have been put into position in the swing states of Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania, who are election denialists, committed election denialists, officials that have been put in place in all of those swing states to make sure that election results, no matter what they are, do not get certified in those states this year. Quote, at least 22 of these election officials have already refused or delayed certification processes in recent elections. According to Democratic election lawyer Mark Elias, quote, I think we are going to see mass refusals to certify the election in November. Quote, Republicans are counting on not just that they can disrupt the election in big counties, they're counting on the fact that if they don't certify in several small counties, you can't certify statewide results. 70 officials in place across just the swing states. For all the surface level weird behavior and language and strange choices and incoherence and odd donors in the Republican campaign, the serious core at the heart of it is that they are not planning on the vote being counted as normal. They are not counting on the election results being tallied as normal. They are not counting on the vote. And in fact, Trump is now repeatedly saying the vote will not matter. He doesn't even want your vote. The Republicans are counting on the election results not being certified, thereby creating chaos in Washington around the results. Just like 2020, right? Just like January 6, 2021, except this time with no Mike Pence in the way and with Republican officials already in place in multiple states saying, yeah, you may not get any sort of official vote. The weirdness of this campaign is astonishing 99 days out. The dislocation from real campaigning, though, the dislocation from actually asking people for their votes, that means something. It means they are not trying to win this thing in a normal way. So 99 days out, as Democrats stand up what, by all accounts, looks like a juggernaut traditional campaign under Kamala Harris, are they prepared for this level of weirdness after the votes are cast? Are they ready for what's coming?
Frankly, I don't feel that enough people are taking Trump seriously. Many of them want to give him a sort of benefit of doubt, even with him ripping those doubts into shreds every chance he can. I have to say, with all things taken into context and the alarming allegations that Elon Musk's sophisticated Starlink satellites were used to manipulate voter data in swing states, at this point I really wouldn't put anything past. Although the FBI has looked into these and so far no allegations have been confirmed as fact. Or an election official in Colorado that leaked their credentials online and provided a safety breach. Starlink satellites also crashed and exploded recently upon re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere right after election, which was suspicious. And several other alarming allegations, such as Elon creating his own app that tabulated the results 4 hours before the results were called, as Joe Rogan told the world on his podcast. I'll play the clip.
It's a little weird that these things are percolating to the surface, information about Musk's involvement and Starlink's involvement. And so to that end, Joe Rogan spoke about, who's clearly got a big hand in this. I mean, you can say what you want. Like, he's just, you can view him as a, he's a podcaster, whatever. He is an extremely influential guy, Joe Rogan. And he's talking to another influential guy, and that's Theo Vaughn. And as you know, I thought Kamala Harris should have made the round on those podcasts, although I don't think it would have changed the outcome. But I don't think Democrats should be afraid of those guys. They're not guys to be afraid of. Again, as I said, I believe last week at some point, if you're not afraid of 60 Minutes, you sure as hell shouldn't be afraid of Joe Rogan and Theo Vaughn. I mean, in 2 hours or whatever length of time in a conversation, it'll feel like people get to know you a bit and probably like you at the end of it. So anyway, on his show, Rogan talks about election night. Go ahead and roll it, please, Tony.
It was interesting because at the beginning of the night, no one knew what was going to happen. So you're watching the first results roll in, and there's like this weird thing. And then Trump gets way ahead, but you're like, you don't want to like get too hopeful. Like, how far ahead is he? He's ahead by 100 points. That seems like a lot.
Yeah, and you're like, what is it? And some channels are like, and then every channel's kind of different.
Yeah. They had different numbers. I was getting a different number off my Apple News update than I was getting off of CNN. And then I was texting people like Tulsi and JD Vance. I was getting a different Apparently, Elon created an app and he knew who won 4 hours before the results. So as the results were coming in, 4 hours before they called it, Dana White told me, Elon was like, I'm leaving. It's over. Donald won. He just fucking somehow or another.
I'm gonna go back into my pod and evaporate.
I don't know what he's getting, where he's pulling his data from, but he had like the most accurate data in terms of the rural states hadn't put the results in yet, but yet Trump was ahead in these states. Kamala's never going to win those states, so tabulated that and like put it all together. I don't know how he did it. But
yeah,
Dana. I haven't even talked to Elon about this. I don't know like the Dana translation, but Dana said he had an app, and he was like showing him. He's like, it's over. And he fucking left. Dude just left.
It's over. John Jones won. Just saying that.
He just fucking left.
Dude.
All right. So that, again, is odd. It is odd, you'll concede, that Elon Musk would have an app that gains early access to data related to voters, don't you think?
Not one for conspiracy theories, and it makes me uneasy to even question the results of an election. But if you hear that and you think, if that's true, big if, and Elon Musk knew the results 4 hours ahead of time, then he had probably access to that Starlink data. And if he had access to create an app with that data, could he have changed that data?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. The way that things are set up, voter machines are generally on private communications. It's set up so that this sort of thing wouldn't be possible. But there is absolutely a drumbeat, and it's getting louder, about Elon Musk. And essentially the notion is he'll stop at nothing to win these races. The other thing, how did Democrats do well in so many states, and yet they voted for Donald Trump? How does Donald Trump win in a state where Democrats down ballot are doing well? And the answer to that may be good old-fashioned ticket splitting. It does happen. You have the North Carolina thing. I'll show you a little bit, give you a preview of that emerging conversation. Here's a bit from North Carolina.
Breaking news in North Carolina, breaking news in the battleground states, and a strange trend I see where practically every statewide Democrat in North Carolina won overwhelmingly, and somehow Donald Trump manages to win. It doesn't make any sense. So just hear me out. Sorry, I'm losing my voice today. But we see Josh Stein, the Democrat, won for governor's race over Mark Robinson by about 800,000 votes. We see in the lieutenant governor's race, we see that a lady, Rachel Hunt, defeated Hal Wethman by 150,000 votes. We see that for attorney general, we see that Jeff Jackson defeated Dan Bishop. Same thing, another 125,000 votes. We see for the superintendent of education, Maurice Green defeated Michelle Morin. Same thing, 2,810,000 to 2,668,000. For the secretary of state, we see another lady winning statewide, Elaine Marshall over Chad Brown. and she wins by 120,000 votes. And then we see that Donald Trump somehow manages to win by 189,406 votes. Every other Democrat won statewide. And then this other interesting fact that doesn't make any sense, 356,884 votes were cast for president only, and they voted for not any other single office in North Carolina. Not for governor, lieutenant governor, Democrat, Republican, independent, nobody. What's up with this? This does not make sense. It doesn't make sense to me. What do you think? Does it make sense to you? Elon Musk, were you there? What do you all think? Something doesn't look right. And this trend is throughout all the battleground states. Democrats win statewide, and somehow Kamala Harris loses. Doesn't make sense. And many of them are women winning in these states.
Yeah, that last point isn't completely incidental, right? So it's not like, well, just people won't vote for a woman. He's saying, you know, women are winning in all of these different races statewide, and all of a sudden they punch it for Donald Trump. It is curious. The math ain't mathin', says Kevin.
So they did win, most of their seats.
They win by a sliver. Let's be clear about that.
True.
I mean, the breaking news, and it is significant, is that Donald Trump won the popular vote, but he did win it by a sliver. It was not this overwhelming win. But, I mean, Republicans don't win the popular vote, aside from, the George Bush exception. But Dino Badala, who does a show on Sirius, he said, I'd sincerely recommend that Biden's administration, while Biden has absolute immunity, have his, I'm laughing because that's always Kim's thing. Why doesn't Biden, if he's got absolute immunity, why does he go down to Mar-a-Lago and storm in? And, it's got that, she's always got a plan.
If democracy is really at risk, take the opportunity to save America. Use your immunity.
I would sincerely recommend, while Biden has absolute immunity, that he has his DHS work with state officials to examine the election results in key states. That would help alleviate concerns that Trump and Elon Musk somehow cheated to win. This investigation needs to conclude well before the electors vote in each state on December 17th to cast their ballots in the Electoral College. So that isn't happening right now, to our knowledge. But I do think some kind of reasonable investigation is just that, reasonable. And I don't know why that can't happen. But it's odd that the right, as represented by Jim Jordan, for example, now feels that this is a free and fair election, yet the last one he said was stolen. So we're confronted with that. He was on CNN.
Election integrity when you lose and not when you win.
No, I mean, again, as I said before, this election, I think, was the greatest political comeback we've ever seen. I mean, he did something that even Teddy Roosevelt couldn't do, for goodness sake. And the country.
But you think it was a free and fair election?
No. This election, you just interviewed the Latino, restaurant owner or a restaurant worker, and he said he was tired of all the woke stuff. This election was real simple. You had back-to-back administrations. We got something we very seldom get in American history, American politics. Back-to-back administrations now running for the top job, and people could do a direct comparison. And they said, we like what we had under President Trump versus.
But last time around,
we like the safe streets versus the record
last
crime.
Time around, your leader claimed that there were problems with
secure
fraud.
border versus the open border.
Right, those are policies.
That's what this election was about.
That's totally fair. But last time around, it wasn't so much about the policy differences or the personality differences. There were false claims about election fraud when Donald Trump lost. This time, Donald Trump won, and you think the election was free and fair. You see there's a little bit of a...
No, I think the Democrats got to ask, why did
there?
we go from getting 81 million to getting 70 million? What happened to those 10 million people? Maybe they needed. Maybe it's not smart to run an election where you have no vision, no record to run on.
Do you believe
that the 2024 names?
Do you believe that the 2024 election was free and fair?
I do.
And why was it different from 2020 when he lost? Is that the only difference?
No, there were concerns about 2020 with all the mail-in voting, that happened. You know, what Pennsylvania had like 2-point-something million mail-in ballots come in without any signature verification, which was required under Pennsylvania statute. So there were all kinds of concerns with how the 2020 election was carried out. But
there was absolutely
the biggest question Democrats need to be asking, what happened to the 10 million voters that Joe Biden got that didn't come out for Kamala Harris? A bunch of them, President Trump's numbers were right up where they were in 2020, but the Democrats were much lower. I think it's because they had no vision, no record to run on, and they just wanted to call everyone names. Turns out when you tell people, oh, you're fascist, racist, deplorable garbage, they don't like that. And then when you use lawfare to go after their candidate, they don't like that either. Well, that's why they came out. So on top of the economy, on top of the price of gas, on top of the inflation, that's why they voted for President Trump.
We're out of time. I just want to say for the record that there was no evidence of widespread fraud in 2020. It went through many, many different court cases. And I do think the name calling,
that's what I was concerned about.
The name calling was very strong on the Republican side of the aisle from the former president, and you know that. So thank you for being here. Appreciate you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got to give her some credit. I mean, she kind of does push back on him, which is nice. But look, we know what's going on, you know, which is why because Democrats always play between the lines and are very concerned about the institutions of governments and a government not breaking anything. They don't really want to make a big deal out of the fact that there might be some irregularities in this election that did or did not exist in the last one, because they so poo-pooed irregularities being mentioned in the last election. And it's fair what she says. They were not just irregularities that were mentioned, they were litigated. I mean, they brought them to courts around the country with no evidence. They were unable to move it. You couldn't have spent more time and money and political capital on that issue, and they were never able to really bring it with evidence. In this case, might there be some evidence? Might there be some fragments on this particular election?
And although they keep reiterating that the voting machines are not linked to the internet or outside connections, however, this is still possible for highly sophisticated spy technology, which is what the Starlink satellites are, satellite internet, and it isn't out of the scope of possibilities. I will say that with the money and resources of Elon and with all these factors separately, they are concerning, but altogether it's beyond concerning at this point and outrageous. It does deserve, I think, further investigation. And I'm pretty sure that's what they've been doing. With MAGA now admitting the Project 2025, it is no surprise that following the election, the LGBT crisis hotline spiked by 700% as morale and mental health crises spiked and are pushed to the max. Trump continues to double down on xenophobia, transphobia, and blatant fear-mongering tactics that have been used by the white nationalist cults for centuries. Nothing new, same old disinformation, propaganda, and hate. Many of them use the name of Christianity while they spew anti-Christian rhetoric and hate. Let me play a clip.
Transgender Awareness Week is a call to uplift the trans community and to memorialize those who have been victims of transphobic violence. But this year's observance comes at an especially difficult time. Just hours after Donald Trump won the presidential election, crisis hotlines that serve LGBTQ+ people reported a staggering uptick in calls. The Trevor Project, a nonprofit that supports LGBTQ+ youth, says it registered a nearly 700% increase in calls, texts, and chat messages the day after the election. It's the end result of a years-long campaign by the Republican Party to demonize the LGBTQ+ community, and especially trans people. And it's far from over. Here's Republican Senator Mark Wayne Mullen earlier today.
The Democrats are spending so much time talking about the scrutiny of President Trump's picks, and yet did we spend this amount of time scrutinizing Biden's pick? I mean, we can talk about Rachel, the Assistant Secretary of HHS. I think that's a pretty controversial pick from whatever pronoun he or she decides to use.
To be very clear, Mullen was asked about the qualifications of Trump's cabinet picks. The question had actually nothing to do with pronouns or gender identity. Now, none of this is new from Republicans, but unfortunately, some Democrats seem to be taking the bait and internalizing the GOP talking point that defending trans rights cost them the election. Days after Trump's victory, Democratic Congressman Tom Suozzi of New York told the New York Times, quote, "I don't want to discriminate against anybody, but I don't think biological boys should be playing in women's sports. Democrats aren't saying that, and they should be," end quote. Congressman Seth Moulton of Massachusetts also chimed in, claiming Democrats are, quote, out of touch on the issue. As he told the Times, "I have 2 little girls. I don't want them getting run over on a playing field by a male or formerly male athlete. But as a Democrat, I'm supposed to be afraid to say that." Moulton then doubled down on that view during this interview on MSNBC with Alex Witt.
And I stand by my position. You know, maybe I didn't get all the words exactly right, but the point is that the backlash I've received proves my point that we can't even have these discussions as a party.
Now, there are many theories as to why Vice President Harris lost, and everyone has their own prescriptions for what the Democratic Party needs to fix in order to better connect with voters. But throwing a marginalized community under the bus, one that is already under attack by the GOP, doesn't seem like the way to do it. And speaking of seeing and connecting with communities, it's worth noting that 86% of LGBTQ plus voters went to the polls and tried to vote Harris into office. In fact, they are an increasingly loyal constituency for Democrats. There's also the fact that Kamala Harris never made trans issues a cornerstone of her presidential campaign. And yet, Republicans spent nearly $215 million on anti-trans ads, many falsely claiming that trans rights would somehow come at the expense of everyone else's rights. Project 2025 is a 900-plus page playbook for the first 180 days of the new Trump administration. And it is literally riddled with proposals to further marginalize the LGBTQ plus community, including and especially trans persons. That means Democrats will have to answer the call and be champions for the community they have for so long claimed to represent. One Democrat is already doing that, and he's doing it from a deep red state, no less. Following Trump's win, Democratic Governor Andy Beshear of Kentucky responded not by blaming transgender people, but by further touting his support for them. In an op-ed written for the New York Times, Beshear said, quote, "As governor, I have vetoed numerous anti-LGBTQ and anti-choice bills, yet I still beat Mr. Trump's hand-picked candidate last fall," end quote. Hours ago, Beshear spoke with Reverend Al Sharpton on this network, and in that interview, he reiterated his commitment to LGBTQ plus rights.
When I vetoed the nastiest anti-LGBTQ bill we'd ever seen last year in my election year, I talked about it. I said, my faith teaches me that every child is a child of God. So I was going to stand up for those kids.
And frankly, at a time in history where the front runner of the Republican Party literally paid over $215 million in anti-transgender ads for his presidency alone, not to mention down the ballot ads on anti-transgender as well. And many of these pushing again and again more disinformation and propaganda as well as lies, and are literally a distraction from the real issues at hand, like the kitchen table issues most families are facing with rising costs and violence on transgender and immigrants, none of which is coming from the trans community, whom many are unable to even secure employment, by the way, let alone a career. And now many are facing possible termination of the only benefits keeping them from starving or their health care coverage just simply for being transgender. Transgender health care is a human right. It shouldn't be taken away. That's wrong. Luckily, even in the face of these blatant white nationalist anti-transgender talking points, which again is literally white nationalist ideology and hatred, and is now being implemented into our governments at the highest levels, and possibly employers as well. Also removing LGBTQ hate crime protections as well as black hate crime legislation. And this is from the con man that told us that the LGBTQ community, that he would protect them and be their protector and president, only to turn around and wage multi-billion-dollar campaign against the LGBTQ community over the next 10 years, and specifically the most vulnerable transgender community. But luckily, at a time when all of this is occurring, the LGBTQ community is under attack by Trump's waged war on transgender people, especially transgender females, but not limited to. And as Trump's pick Pete Hegseth, that he wants to put into the top cabinet position overseeing the military, has his views on against women serving in the military and LGBTQ in combat, with very sexist and old worldviews, as if gender limits one's ability or skill. And this is just white nationalist propaganda, and they're trying to kill the democracy in the process, literally. They can't be the darkness and the light at the same time. It just doesn't work that way. And now is the time that we must organize and stand up for our rights and freedoms. And frankly, everything we have come to know is under threat because we have mentally unstable sociopaths that aren't going to be looking out for Americans' interests, but rather stewing over their own enemies' lists, just as Kamala Harris warned us. And she was right. Already they're seeking retributions, challenging, sending threats. And she was the only one with the plan for all Americans, not just the top 1% like Donald Jessica Trump. He's bought and paid for, and his cheap mail-ordered bride, Melania, who won't even stay in the White House with him, by the way. She hasn't been staying with him in Florida. She's been in New York. So, before I close out, as I was saying, at a time when transgender people are literally under attack, and when Trump has even waged war on the transgender youth for the first time ever, a transgender congresswoman was elected to office. Yes, that's right. At a time when it needed the most. Sarah McBride from Delaware won her election and made history as the first ever open transgender to be elected to Congress. And she'll play a pivotal role and a powerful voice for civil rights and liberties, and to advocate for the LGBT community and her role in the Senate, because she's Delaware's senator. So way to go. Congratulations to her. And I want to congratulate her. I'm so proud, especially when the odds were stacked against her. She's brave, and I like that. Also, Iowa actually had our first elected congresswoman in the state house who's transgender, from a smaller town than Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And so that was good news as well. And her name is Amy Wheatendale. And most importantly, though, she's trying to help better the people, not rip them off or push some transgender everything agenda like Trump and the bigot wants you to think. And Sarah says when they distract you from the real issues and start talking about transgender, LGBTQ, or immigrants even, it's a distraction from the fact that they don't have real policies for the people. Let me play this clip.
Folks across this country right now are scared. I think folks across this country are facing a crisis of hope. And I think those ads were part of a long-term strategy by the far right wing in this country, which is a strategy to pick a small and vulnerable, misunderstood community to fearmonger and scapegoat around in order to distract and divide from the fact that those far right-wing politicians have absolutely no policy solutions for the issues that are actually keeping people up at night.
Well, joining me now, we have Democratic Congresswoman-elect Sarah McBride of Delaware. She will become the first openly transgender member of Congress. So, Congresswoman-elect, welcome. It's nice to have you on the show for the first time. So let's talk about one of your top campaign issues, which was the expansion of health care. What do you make of Donald Trump's pick for RFK Jr. as head of Health and Human Services?
Well, they're clearly not sending their best. We all know that RFK Jr. peddles in conspiracy theories, but beyond all of that, he's simply unqualified to manage a department with a $1.6 trillion budget, a department that not only protects public health, but administers Medicare and Medicaid, critical benefits that Americans rely on to get health coverage and to stay healthy. So having someone like RFK in the leadership of a critical department is going to grind that department to a halt. It's going to undermine benefits and programs that American workers, retirees, and families rely on. And it's going to have, sadly, dangerous consequences for the American people. It's one of the reasons why the Senate must step up to fulfill its constitutional advise and consent responsibilities, to hold the Trump-Vance administration accountable and to guarantee that these dangerous and unqualified nominees do not get these positions.
Now, former Congressman and now Democratic Governor of Colorado, Jared Polis, said on X that he is HHS and FDA. And then he later clarified in a post that while he and his family are vaccinated and, quote, the science-backed decision to get vaccinated improves public health and safety, he continued, if, as a country, we follow the science, we would also be far more concerned about the impact of pesticides on public health, AG policy on nutrition, and the lack of access to prescription drugs due to drug high prices. How do you interpret what he's saying there? Is he potentially whitewashing what RFK Jr. is really hoping to achieve?
There's no question that we have to hold polluters and those who would poison our environment accountable. There's no question that we have to hold pharmaceutical companies accountable and bring down the cost of prescription drugs for the American people, something that Democrats did when we had control of the federal government. But that's not what RFK represents. What RFK represents are dangerous conspiracy theories that could lay the foundation not just for individual Americans to get sick or ill, but could lay the foundation for another pandemic here in this country and globally at a time when Americans are thankfully finally through COVID-19.
So RFK Jr. has repeatedly and absurdly claimed that chemicals in our water are changing children's sexuality and gender identity. Pete Hegseth, Trump's Secretary of Defense pick, has said being transgendered in the military causes complications and differences. Donald Trump said in his second term he will pull providers out of Medicare and Medicaid for offering gender transition care to minors and will purge from the federal government anything deemed to promote transgender identity. What impact will the next Trump administration have on the LGBTQ community beyond the surge of calls to crisis hotlines that have been happening since his election?
There's no question that this incoming administration will seek to undermine freedoms for Americans of all backgrounds, including LGBTQ people. Look, this is a weird and bizarre obsession with trans people on the part of the Republican Party. And I agree with Republican governors who, when presented with the spate of anti-LGBTQ bills passed in state legislatures across the country, said these are solutions in search of a problem. And that's what we have to be crystal clear about moving forward. Because whenever you see a politician or a political party focus in on an issue that impacts a handful of people in a handful of places, you have to ask yourself why. And the answer to that is they are trying to distract. They are trying to distract from what they are actually doing. And over the next 4 years, every single time we see any member of the Trump-Vance administration talk about trans people, talk about immigrants, talk about Muslims, talk about any vulnerable group in this country, look what they're doing with their right hand. Because I can guarantee you at that same moment, they are working to pick the pockets of American workers. They're working to fleece seniors by privatizing Social Security and Medicare. They're working to undermine the critical programs and benefits that Americans of every background and every political persuasion rely on to just get through the day. And that's what these efforts are. They are an effort to distract from the real issues that are plaguing this country and to distract from what Donald Trump and J.D. Vance will do with their nearly unchecked power.
All right, Congresswoman-elect Sarah McBride of Delaware, congratulations on your win. And I know we'll be speaking with you certainly over the next couple of years. Thank you so much.
And as Sarah McBride points out, the importance of choosing qualified nominees for top positions that have the experience and are going to honor their oath to the Constitution instead of spreading instead of sycophants that are going to honor their oath to specifically only to Trump. And Trump is choosing sycophants simply because their unwavering support and blind loyalty to Trump and the MAGA cult. And I do mean cult in every definition and aspect of the term, but this is very dangerous and potentially asking for another major catastrophe, much like the last Trump presidency and the COVID pandemic. Let me play this clip.
There are some places your boy leaves the school, comes back, a girl.
This was part of the latest false claim from Donald Trump, that children are undergoing transition-related surgery during their school day. It came in response to a question about how he'd fix public schools in the Bronx, New York. Trump first ranted about slashing the Department of Education before he took aim at trans youth.
When they talk about a threat to democracy, they're a threat. Could you imagine without parental consent?
It's at least the third time that he's repeated these claims in which there is no evidence that this kind of surgery has taken place at any school in the U.S., or that any school in the U.S. has sent a student to have this surgery done. About half of U.S. states ban transition-related surgeries for minors, and of those that do allow it, it's still rare. The head of the National Association of School Nurses previously told NBC News that even when it comes to giving over-the-counter medicine like Tylenol, school nurses need explicit permission from a doctor and a parent.
There are some places your boy leaves the school, comes back, a girl.
This was part of the latest false claim from Donald Trump.
And again, like Senator-elect McBride said, it's a distraction anytime you hear them speaking about the transgender community or even the immigrants or Muslims. And I'm sure that they will try to push a ban again this term as well. Especially since Israel is now planning on annexing West Bank, much like Putin was trying to do to Ukraine and is still trying to do. But she brings up a good point that I've noticed, and that is these mega cultists all have a weird obsession over genitals, and many of them get off on it like the nasty perverts they are. Much like this Arkansas representative in this next clip, whom, by the way, this is a transgender doctor they're completely being disrespectful to, and actually beyond disrespectful. And the guy is secretly getting off on it until he realizes how gay he sounded, and then he tries to turn it around on the transgender doctor as if she brought it up. Just sickening. Let me play the clip.
You said that you're a trans woman.
I trans female, yes, sir.
Do you have a penis?
That's horrible.
You're the one that brought that into the discussion. You're the one that
never
brought that
said
into
anything about genitalia.
Oh, it has everything to do with genitalia.
I don't know what my rights are for right now.
Audience, if you want to stay in here,
I don't know what my rights are, but that question was
Ma'am, you don't
highly
have to-
inappropriate.
You do not have to answer any question. If you're through, we'll dismiss you.
Well, I'm not through with questions, but I'm not going to answer that question. That's
Okay.
highly inappropriate.
Again, you can say that, and that's your right. So.
Okay. I'm a
there any
healthcare professional, a
are there any other
doctor. Please
questions?
treat me as such. Next question, please.
And with Trump's own accusations, and then his accusations over his $215 million campaign in anti-transgender propaganda, and even going as far as to try to redefine the word woke as if it has something to do with sexuality or gender identity, which the word has nothing to do with whatsoever. It's not what the word means. Although with him actively attacking the marginalized community and even making mental health crises spike 700% in LGBT youth alone, as well as violence towards drag queens, transgender people, and immigrants skyrocket. And what's really sad is these individuals that are pushing this white nationalist propaganda and hate are literally the predators. With more than 4 sexual predators alone, possibly 4 or 5 or more in his cabinet choice selections alone. That's just what I know so far, including several of them sexually assaulting minors, underage pedophiles. Literally, the main one who was terrorizing children with Epstein and in more than 8 separate flight logs. Let's not forget that he has his own plane as well. So those were just the times that he flew on Epstein's jet, which, by the way, he was using during this election cycle while J.D. Vance was flying on the Trump plane. He was using Epstein's old plane as well. It's important to not be distracted by the shiny objects and to pay attention to everything. And if anyone believed Trump in what he was saying about schools, etc., such as the schools grooming children or transitioning children, you're gullible and naive, and you're a slowpoke, and frankly, you're probably headfirst in the Kool-Aid trough. It's a task to even get hormones as an adult, let alone as a child. And there's even more guardrails as a child, as one would expect. You must usually get a psych doctor's approval as well before you get on hormone replacement therapy. In many cases, the doctor will screen and evaluate the reasons for wanting hormones in the first place, and to make sure that it's something that you truly want and not just some new phase or trend. And as tensions are heightened, I don't think many even realize yet what they voted for. Some are even getting the sad reality of the Trump 20% national sales tax, which is the tariffs that will jack up prices, coupled with Trump tax breaks to the ultra wealthy, the elite oligarchs, which funded his campaigns. This will spike inflation, and the MAGA cult will start to implode on itself as inflation rises again. Many are already mad that they won't be getting Christmas bonuses this year because of the Trump tariffs, and many companies are preparing and taking precautionary steps ahead of time and canceling people's Christmas bonuses, as well as many others are laying people off altogether. Meanwhile, activist groups and LGBTQ community, as well as the Black community and Indigenous, are coming together to take bold actions. Pride activists in San Francisco are organizing to begin a fundraiser for LGBTQ community for those to use who are currently in a Republican state with anti-LGBTQ legislation. This fund would help them to get to a blue state, somewhere like California, where their rights would be respected. and protected. I'll show a clip about it.
We have a responsibility to make sure that we are doing everything we can to protect our people, no matter where they live.
The executive director of San Francisco Pride is speaking out in wake of Donald Trump being again elected president.
We know during the campaign that the red meat that he threw out was denying trans people medical treatment and our rights.
And she says when more than 50% of the country votes for someone running on that kind of platform,
then trans people rightly are frightened and know that we have to act.
And they're doing just that at a board meeting tonight, putting into motion plans to use their platform.
We've got to find a way to develop a fund that will allow us to bring people out of red states to states like California. We absolutely have to.
And San Francisco's Office of Transgender Initiatives doubling down on its commitment to providing a safe haven.
A lot of us are really fighting for our lives, and we're going to be able to form really strong bonds around that, and I think do some really great organizing work.
And Gael Lala Chavez agrees. They're the executive director of Lyric, a local nonprofit providing services to transgender youth for decades, many of whom have fled states with laws targeting the transgender community.
I will say this, Lyric will continue to open our doors and keep our doors open for every young person that needs it.
And they say conversations with other LGBTQ plus organizations and beyond are already underway.
If we are at capacity, do you have space? And just, when we talk about safety, it's not just safety for Lyric, it is safety for everyone.
This as multiple trans-serving organizations are coming together Thursday for a healing circle in support of one another. Tara Campbell, ABC 7 News.
And I want to leave on a message of hope and unity. We're stronger in numbers. We must organize now more than ever and stand united and speak up to social injustices and stand our ground, stand up for our constitutional rights and freedoms and liberties. And together we can make a better tomorrow, I promise. Things will get better. I know it seems kind of crazy right now, but things will get more expensive, unfortunately, and people will get mad and turn on each other within the MAGA cult. So things might get worse before they get better. But if we stand united together and continue to call out injustices and our indifferences and stand up for our liberties and freedoms and respect and human rights and decencies, we will usher in a better tomorrow, I promise. We must be ready to invite them into our coalition and to finally bring together a movement for the people, not the oligarchs. Trickle-down economics is a scam. And please, if you haven't already, like my video and please subscribe to my channel. It really goes a long way and it helps me a lot. Make sure you click the bell for all the latest updates and notifications. And be sure to support the local news media outlets such as mine, as it is important for these times to come. I'll have another video coming out soon. I'm going to go over the cabinet picks. I know that Matt Gaetz was his pick for the AG, and since then he's finally dropped out, and now the Attorney General from Florida, her name is Pam Bondi. She was actually the trial lawyer in the first impeachment of Trump. Yes, he's had 2 impeachments in his first term alone. First felon. Now he's grifting off being a felon, selling a $2 bill, a fake $2 bill with his mugshot on it, saying that he's the first felon president ever, and selling this. I mean, you can't make this shit up. But anyway, please subscribe to my channel for all the latest topics and for your own trusted independent news as I bring the highlights from the week into focus. I'm going to do a focus video on what I believe played against the Democrats in this year's election as well. That will be coming out soon because it was many, many things that mostly all disinformation and propaganda. And I'm not even going to get started on that, but be sure to tune in for more on that. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And like I said, it really does help me a lot. And as I'm building my channel, and it gets my message out to people that wouldn't otherwise see it and to the algorithms. And if you stayed to the end, please put a purple heart in the comments below. And thank you so much. And have an amazing day. Try to remember the power of positivity and trying to look for the good in any and every situation. Even when things don't go in your favor, you will accomplish more than if you submit to defeat. They have already started to introduce discriminatory legislation addressing the bathrooms at the Capitol as Nancy Mace started to push stunts recently as well. I think they were trying to get a distraction off Matt Gaetz before he dropped out, and shows for her audience of one, basically, in a blatant transphobic attack on Sarah McBride. So I'm going to have more to say on that. As she seems to have a personal vendetta, by the way, as she pushes more disinformation and blatant transgender phobia and attacks on specifically transgender rights, and then tries to paint the left as erasing women's rights and replacing the women with transgender people, which people like Trump and these MAGA extremists want people to think that, that transgender rights come at the expense of at others' rights. And this is far from the truth. Transgender people don't even get special privileges. We get discriminated by evil, self-centered individuals like Nancy Mace.
Anywhere across the country.
Yeah, but are you going after a marginalized person here?
Sarah McBride doesn't get a say in this. This is a biological man trying to force himself into women's spaces, and I'm not going to tolerate it. You have the radical left that are trying to erase women and erase women's rights. I'm the first woman to graduate from the Citadel, the Military College of South Carolina. If some guy in a skirt came by and said, no, that's my achievement, I'm going to be there and standing in the way and saying, hell no. I'm not going to allow men to erase women or women's rights. And I'm going to be standing up here. I will file this again next congressional session. Sarah McBride doesn't get a say. This is about women. This is about girls. This is about our rights and being protected in our private spaces. I don't want to see a man in a women's restroom. That's not a thing. And it's not going to be a thing up here. It's not going to be a thing anywhere across the country either. Thank you so much.
Transgender rights do not come at the expense of women's rights, and Kamala was the only one advocating for women's rights, frankly, so I don't know why anyone would vote for someone other than Kamala if you wanted women's rights. Anyway, more to come on all of that in my next video. Be sure to subscribe, and thank you for watching to the end. Have a good day.